Hey everyone, this is Steve and I am Engine Post, and today I'm going to show you in a Fusion tutorial how to pull off this effect. This is a 5-part series where we're going to go through everything from creating that portal effect, animating it, tying animations together by using expressions. We're going to discuss how to build the background plates for images and pull focus. We're going to use a third-party tool to do that that's very reasonably priced, as well as how to sync audio. So again, this is a 5-part series. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Alright, welcome back to the next tutorial in this series for building a portal in Fusion. What you can see on the screen is the effect we're going for, and so far in the previous two tutorials we talked about how to build this circular torus-like portal and animate it. And the next thing we're going to talk about is how do we build this background plate. Notice that it's in focus in the distance, and then the focus shifts from what's in focus in the distance to focusing on the platform, and then the man appears in the platform. So we're going to talk a bit about that as we go forward here. I'm going to talk a little bit about tools. So this is going to be about Fusion, but it's about Fusion at the end of this. So the first part of this is really going to be about something else. And so we'll get to compositing in the next tutorial. But this tutorial is really about how do we build those plates. Because what we're really doing is we are first showing a picture with a blurry platform, right? Next, we are changing the focus by showing a picture with a blurry sky and a NIR Focus, clear focus platform. And then finally, we're ending with this guy standing on the clear focus platform while the city is blurry. So how did I do that? So this tutorial is really, again, less about Fusion and more about how to do some Photoshop type stuff. So before we go, let's talk about where I got my pictures. So out here we have an image that I picked up from Pexels.com. And so Pexels.com is a website where you can go to grab free license Creative Commons photography and artwork, mostly photography. There's also a video section where you can grab minutes of video that have been shared along many different topics. And so this actual artwork here that I selected by typing in city in Pexels, and then I picked it here, you have to always examine the license because there can be different licenses applied. But this one happens to be free for personal and commercial use and no attribution required, so I can freely use it. So I just downloaded it, but then I need to edit it, right? So most people use Adobe Photoshop to edit. It's sort of the premier tool in the industry, there's no question. And it does a lot of very super cool stuff. But notice down here, it's only $19.99 a month to rent this tool. That's right, you can't own it anymore. You have to go back to previous versions that aren't going to adapt or grow if you want to own a copy of Photoshop. But if you rent it for 20 bucks a month, you can have it for as many months as you're willing to pay for it. And at the moment, most people buy a year. So what does that turn into? Hey Google, what is 20 times 12?
The answer is 240.
So obviously $240 is what you're going to pay to rent this for a year, and then it dies, meaning it ceases to work for you until you start renting it again. You get a lot of cool features, they keep adapting it, that's cool, but you got to pay 250 bucks. Let's talk about an alternative. And no, we're not going to talk about GIMP. We're going to talk about something called Affinity Photo. And Affinity Photo is a tool built by a group that built lots of really clever photo manipulation engines, and they've built this for a very long time. But in the most recent years, they sort of put together a UX team and completely reinvented the tool that sits on top of those very clever engines. So the engines back in the day were tools that they would often give away, but they had really clumsy user interfaces, and the user experience of those tools was kind of awful. You'll notice that this tool is basically a very high-end competitor to Adobe Photoshop, and it does just about everything Photoshop does. Now, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it does do an amazing amount of stuff for being a tool that only costs $50, folks. Only $50. There's no subscription fee. You can own it for as long as you want. The original was an award-winning Macintosh version. The Windows version is literally identical. They are awesome. And you get upgrades throughout the life of a version. So like a subscription tool, you get all the feature upgrades as they go. They do not wait to roll that into a 2.0. But the reality is they do roll out an eventual 2.0, and then you have to pay an upgrade fee to sort of move on to the next version, the next, X dot whatever version, so the next X level. And so that's it's an incredible deal. Basically what that means is you would have to buy this tool 4 times. And I've only seen them come out with a version about once every 2 years, but they add tons of features in between major versions. So it's insane. So basically you're getting a really good deal for a fraction of the cost. And I know that that's because they're competing with Adobe. And so that's where we're going to do our little tutorial today. We're going to actually do it in Affinity Photo. So let's take a look at that. Here we have that picture that I just loaded. Holding the spacebar, I can kind of drag it around the screen a little bit so we can get a good view of it. And now what we need to do is we need to break that into those plates. So we need a plate that doesn't have the guy in it, that has the sky in the background in focus and the platform blurry. Then we need a version where the sky in the background is blurry, and we pull the focus forward so the platform is in focus. And then finally we need the guy to appear in the photo, right? So that's sort of our workflow that we're looking at. And the way to do that is first we're gonna take this background, which will eventually be we'll call it the NIR Focus with guy. We need at least one copy of that to start. So let's click that, and we're gonna hit Control J on the keyboard, and I'm gonna call this far focus. Eventually we'll create a near focus without the guy, right? But far focus will have the skyline in focus, but we won't have him on the platform. It'll just be a platform out of focus. And the way we do that is so cool and simple here in Affinity Photo. We'll go to the healing tools. There's all kind of patch and blemish removal. We're going to grab in painting. I'm going to zoom in by holding Control and running the mouse wheel so I can focus on this guy. And now I'm going to use the bracket keys near my enter key to change the size of that little circle. What I want to do is I want to highlight him and reach over the edge of him as I highlight to select what is both him as well as a pinch of the background as I encircle him and I ramble to you. That's what just happened. Now I'm going to just kind of swoop through here and fill out the rest of him as I go. And that will sort of end up being where, when I let go of the mouse, it now knocks him off the scene. So notice it's duplicated some buildings, and that's a little bit cruddy. And it's actually, being as tight as I did, it kind of like messed up the highway a little bit here. But when I roll out, it's not that noticeable. And this is just an experiment, right? So we're cool with that. This is going to be our skyline view with a far focus. And so what we need to do is we need a far focus and a near focus. So we need 2 versions of this image. So right away, I'm going to hit Control J. And now I have 2 far focus images. So now I'm going to have that one be called far, this one be called near focus, and the last one be called near focus with a guy, which we have, right? So let's go up to far focus and let's make it so that this is in focus and this is not. And the way to do that is we're going to go up to the selection tools. If I click and hold the one below that, rather, that's flood selection. Let's see here. Okay, so here's a lot of different selection tools: rectangular, circle, column marquee, row marquee. I want the freehand. And what freehand does, if I set it on new, as I draw, it's like a vector path that converts to a marching ants non-vector raster kind of selection, right? Hit Control D to deselect. But if I hold Shift down, now I can just hit individual points and do like this very geometric vector style selection, and I double click to end it. And again, it's still a marching ants raster style. Control D to unselect. So now let's grab that platform, and the way I'm going to do that is hold space, pull up so I see the whole platform, and start drawing my mask with the Shift key selected. And I don't have to be too precise because I will feather the mask at the end here, but I want to be a little precise. We're not going to get nuts though. Let's just do it like this. And double click. And now we have the platform selected. So again, we need to feather this, and we want it to be out of focus when it's the far that's in focus. So to do that, I'm going to go up here, and rather than type in a feather, I want it to be sort of interactive. So I hit select, and I'll go down to feather. And now with that selected, I'm going to be able to mess with that radius till I'm happy. And I just want it, so notice in the corners here, so that it barely curves my corners. And that means we don't have a massive selection. There we go. I'm happy with that. So let's apply that. So now this is going to be out of focus. And the way to do that is to hit Filter, Blur, now Gaussian Blur. And I like that. Looks good. 2 pixel blur. That works for me. Apply, deselect just for fun. Yep, that looks like a far focus, right? Everything out there you can still see. Everything right here you can't see it. You can still see stuff like this because this is probably, you know, equally far away in terms of a lens focus, but this is way too close physically, so it's not like a gradient focus. It's very selective. So let's turn that layer off. That one works. Let's go down to NIR Focus. I'm going to hit Control Z a couple times till I get my selection back. There we go. Now I'm going to turn that layer off. You might as well lock that so we never screw that up again. If I go down to NIR Focus, now I want to invert this mask, so I'm selecting everything other than the platform, right? And that's pretty easy. I can go up here and just hit Select, and then I can invert pixel selection. And now it's changed it. Notice how it goes around this, and it should grab the whole image all the way around it. It's just doing it sort of outside the visual border there. So let me just scroll out with the mouse wheel. There we go. We can see how it's grabbing the whole thing. Now let's apply that blur again. And we'll be sure on the right layer, NIR Focus. So Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur. If I hit Repeat Gaussian Blur, it just applies it programmatically exactly as it is. If I hit Blur Gaussian Blur, it opens up the tool but continues to set it to the value I set it to. So now it's made the blur the same level, 2 pixels. So in other words, 2 pixels was fine to blur this. If we invert it, it's a perfect sort of conversion blur there on the 2 pixels. And now we'll say apply. So that worked. I love that. Now we need to expand on that mask, right? So the way to expand that mask is I'm going to keep hitting. Actually, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to deselect. I'm satisfied with that. I'm going to lock that layer. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go to the NIR Focus. And this time I need to draw the mask again around the guy. And that means I need to be more precise. Holding the space bar gives me my grabby hand. I'll put it in the middle. Control with the mouse wheel lets me zoom way in so that I'm sure I get everything I need. Let's go back and select our selection tool and hold Shift, and we start a clicking. So again, this time we're going to be a lot more precise. Not insanely precise. We're just not going to blur it as much this time because we're grabbing this guy as well, and I don't want these buildings outside of him to show up and look like they're bleeding through the edges of him. So I'm kind of, notice how I'm staying inside of him as I make these little selections. And I just want to select everything I can. Now, if we were doing video, if this had been video and I just videotaped all this, or, you know, filmed it or whatever nomenclature you want to use, depending on the equipment you have, I would have just shot what's called a blank plate, right? So I would not have had the guy walk out on the block yet here, this little platform block area, and I would have shot a scene where the distance was in focus and this block platform here was not. Then when it was relatively still in the distance, I might have shot, I'm going to double click here to end that selection. Then I might have pulled the focus to the platform and told the guy to book it, just run out to the end of the platform and start acting. So he would have ran out to the end of the platform, waited a second or two, and then turn around and walk toward me. Then when I edit that later, I can overlay the part where he's already at the end of the platform with the first part, and that'll make it look like he's appearing. The only thing I'd have to watch for would be things like is he, you know, are there planes in the sky that have moved too far so that when he appears, it appears to be seconds later. Sometimes it's good to even simulate that stuff. Not simulating seconds later, but simulate a plane flying through the sky or something like that, so that implies that this is happening in real time and it's not like a weird choppy edit, right? I hope that made sense. But now, okay, before we move on, we have to cut out between his legs here. And the way to do that is I'm going to hit subtract, and I'm going to zoom in even more. So holding the mouse button, grab the hand, put him to the center of the screen, control scroll with the mouse wheel. Holding shift and having it on subtract, I'm now going to cut out the inside of his legs, which is the city view. Again, that's got to be blurry. So again, all I've done is select the first bit. I want to get that level with this here, right? So that it looks right on the focus. I'm selecting the inside of his legs so that it basically keeps his pants in focus. I'm going to double click it right here to end it, and it will blur out what's inside there. So again, control roll with the mouse, and then I'm going to grab with the hand, and now I'm going to invert the mask. But before I do, actually I'm going to invert the mask right away. Select invert pixels, and now I want to soften it. So select feather, and I'm going to roll it up till my corners and all the selection looks like it's still there, but it's rounded there. That looks pretty good. Nice rounded edges there. So the selection looks nice and smooth. And now I'm just going to apply, again, the same trick. Filter, blur. Now, again, if I hit this, it just applies it. I want to fiddle with it, maybe. But it should remember where we left off, which is 2 pixels. And that's what the other plate looked like, and you want them to match. You want the near focus without him to match the near focus with him, so it doesn't look like there was a jump focus or something like that, right? So I'm going to apply that, hit Control D to deselect, and now we have our 3 images. So we're almost there. Let's take a look at those 3 images. It should start out that it looks like the city's in focus and the platform is not. Select that so I don't mess up. Then it should shift to the platform being in focus. We might want to fiddle with the lighting to sort of really set the stage so that their eyes come to the platform. And then, finally, he appears on the platform. So now we need to save these things. So let's save them all. So if I go out to the first frame, I'm going to hit Control-Shift-Alt-S. And then from here with a JPEG, I'm going to hit Export. And I've already done this, but I'll do it a different way this time. So it's a pixels photo, right? We said that already. I'm going to get rid of all the stuff off the end here. And what I don't want to do is this. I don't want to say 1, 2, and 3. And the reason is when you drag these things into Fusion, it'll add a bunch of images, but it'll add them as individual frames in an animation. We don't want that. That's crazy talk. And it'll actually set up the animation too. So you could group it all together and say, this is my little animation I'm dealing with. So again, you just dump all the frames in, it stacks them all together and makes them appear in transition one frame at a time. But again, don't do that. We don't want to do that. So I'm going to use Roman numerals for this. What I did before is I used letters A, B, and C, right? But I'll just say this is Pexels Photo I. And I'm going to hit Save. And now I'm going to turn that layer off so I can see the focus change layer and do it again. Control-Alt-Shift-S. And now I'm going to hit Export on that. And this one is going to be called Pexels Photo II for 2. And hit Save. That works for me. And then the final image with just him in focus, and that's Control-Shift-Alt-S again. Export. And then the third version, right? All right. That works for me, and I'm going to hit save again. So I've saved everything. I really need to get these now into Fusion and do something clever with it. But this concludes this tutorial. So in the next tutorial, we're actually going to do the compositing of those different image states. But I hope that you learned something new, or that maybe you didn't know about our opportunity to use Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer, and they're building an InDesign tool as well. So Affinity Designer is actually like an Illustrator tool, which is also very incredible. But again, at incredibly good prices. They're all like $50, right? So incredible. Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing here. Again, the next thing we're going to do is compositing. We'll end with some audio, because this actually has some audio on it that I've added. Let's have a final listen before we go so we know where we're headed. So then I'll show you where to get all that and how to put it into Fusion as well. But that's it for now. Talk to you in the next tutorial.